This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. For this episode of the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast, I'm in Burlington, Vermont. And joining me is Joe Lemnah, owner and founder of Burlington Beer Company. Welcome to the podcast, Joe.
Thank you, Jamie. Good to have you.
The first time I went to Burlington Beer was, I think it was 2018. I was doing a very quick run around northern Vermont, just trying to see all the places that I'd been wanting to see but never had. And at that point, you guys were a tiny little tap room carved out of a production facility. And this time I came back to Burlington. You've got this beautiful tap room restaurant facility where you're also making, you have a sour beer program here. And it's a whole different picture. I was there on a Friday afternoon, Friday evening. It was packed. People were enjoying it. The food was great. The beer was great. And I thought, you know what? We need to get a podcast down here.
Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah. It's been very cool to see how things have grown for you. Can't wait to talk to you. I mean, I always have been a fan and intrigued by your approach to Hazy IPA. And I noticed that especially here now, you have jumped on, well, I shouldn't say jumped on, you are making more expansive lagers. You've built a very wide range of beers because you're also making people happy right here at this tap room within this kind of food environment, which, it's amazing how many breweries are now so focused on this full spectrum of hospitality here in Vermont. And it seems like, from Von Trapp to Lawson's to having a place for people to come eat and drink together is such a powerful thing out here in the mountains, or this is on lakeside here in Vermont, maybe not the mountains. Anyway, we're going to talk about your approach to making beer, always informed, by a kind of hip modern sensibility, which, with progressive styles, with progressive art and progressive brand, which always kind of stuck out here in Burlington. Very cool. We're going to talk about all that, but first, at G&D Chillers, they always strive to build great chillers. Partner with them as you build great beer. Kevin Toger from Bearded Iris Brewing says G&D Chillers have been a valuable partner throughout our growth. They build high-quality equipment and know their machines extremely well. Most importantly, their customer service is best in class, which is a huge value add to our internal teams that manage these critical support systems. Choose G&D Chillers on your next expansion or brewery startup and receive 1 free year of remote control and monitoring on your new G&D Chiller. And ProBrew is the industry partner the brewers trust to take their operations to the next level, especially when it comes to canning their product for distribution. By partnering with ProBrew, brewers can fill and seam their canned product. It ranges from 100 to 600 cans per minute. Their unique filling process also ensures low dissolved oxygen pickup and focuses on product quality during the entire process. For more information, visit probrew.com or email them at contactus@probrew.com. ProBrew. Brew your beer. Also, Old Orchard has supplied flavored craft juice concentrate blends to over 46 states for the production of fruit-forward beer, cider, seltzer, wine, spirits, and more. By partnering with some of the biggest names in the craft brewing landscape, Old Orchard has become a go-to source of fruit-forward ingredients. To learn more and request your free samples, head on over to oldorchard.com/brewer. All right, Joe. Let's talk about the Burlington beer story. And really, the story starts with you early in your career. What got you into beer and what, map out your arc through the world of brewing that led you here to start Burlington Beer?
Well, growing up in Vermont, my palate was raised on Long Trail, Otter Creek, all those OGs from the Vermont craft beer scene through the 90s and early 2000s. Then I went on a cross-country trip and visited all these different breweries and brew pubs, and the original Deschutes brew pub in Oregon, Bend, and just continued to fall in love with modern craft beer and started homebrewing and just really got bit by that bug of that blend of, it says so many times, of that nexus of art, creativity, and history and science all coming together of what makes beer great. And just really leaned into it, got a job on a packaging line, just started grinding back in 2006, stuffing 6-packs in cases, and started homebrewing and really burned the candle at both ends. Malcolm Gladwell's, getting that 10,000 hours, and did the math and like, oh, that's 40 hours a week for 5 years. I could probably do that in 2.5 if I just spend 60, 70, 80 hours a week doing it. Go. And so really brewed 200, a little over 250 batches over a 3-4 year period while brewing professionally.
Oh, man.
And went to the American Brewers Guild in Middlebury with Steve Parks, and kind of wanted to learn the professional side of how this is done right on a medium to large industrial scale, but also develop my own brewing style over that same period of time. So I would have 10 to 20 carboys of beer going at a time and be brewing. There was one year I brewed 58 batches of beer in a single year. Had a whole homebrew blog, hopfentretter.com, named after my kind of nom de plume from the Randy Mosher book of the old hop pickers from Bavaria. There was this little excerpt on a page of, oh, these are the shoes of the old Hopfentretter. And I was like, oh, I fucking like that. That's kind of cool. I'm going to take that. And so I started that homebrew blog, and in the early years of Twitter, meeting that whole homebrew community that was thriving back at that time, and continued to just kind of hone my craft professionally at work every day and at home every day. And got a job at Dogfish Head, brewed there for a couple years, then became assistant brew master at Evolution Brewing down in Delaware, Maryland. But it was always my dream and goal to come back home to Vermont to start my own brewery. And so in 2012, moved back here and got a location to start doing that.
So so now you could brew, and you've now gone through this period of home brewing an enormous amount of beer. I can't imagine, like, you had to have a lot of friends to share that much beer with over the course of a year, brewing at that kind of volume, which, it's a great way to make some friends. Of course, craft beer in 2012, 2013 is now starting to change. We're starting to see breweries pop up, and, there's some of the older traditional styles where, they're still there, they're still being made, but there's new opportunities, new hop varieties. And, that period was a really ripe one for innovation. So you started Burlington Beer Company. What kind of beer did you decide to make?
Well, it's funny you say that, because I was still coming, I'm 41 years old now and was around 30 years old then, but still had that more traditional old school mindset. Even though I was making in the homebrew scale, different out there culinary inspired beers, a smoked paprika and, caraway seed pumpernickel style porter or something, or different things like that, or Hefeweizens with bay leaves and blood oranges and peppercorns and stuff, but still kind of subtle with the spices.
Charlie Papazian, just get weird with it.
Get weird with it. It's beer. Let's have some fun. But still was like, okay, these things are subtle. You want it like a coriander and a Belgian wit. Like, it shouldn't be like hitting you over the head with that flavor. And so I started the brewery with an English mild, because I love that style so much. Brown ales, a table saison, a pale ale, and kind of a multi-grain golden ale. Styles I loved brewing. Didn't see them represented in the market, but things I love to drink and brew. And, we still get to produce some styles like that, but over time creeping up, people are like, where's your double IPA?
Sure. This is Vermont after all. You have to have a double IPA.
Exactly. So then really just leaning into,
and that model was different. People coming to a tap room, but also then wanting to buy beer to take away. It's like, those are great styles. If you're in this kind of environment where people are drinking them with food, it may not be the tap room where I'm just going to go try something interesting. And it's a little
so
different
true.
mode, right?
It's so true.
It took a while, I imagine, for it to all come back.
It did. Yeah. Now with this new 300 seat restaurant tap room, we definitely see those more brew pub style beers performing really well here. And it's nice to see those beer flavored beers being ordered much more often. I mean, there's just a different purchasing mentality from the customer of what they're going to order when they're on site to what they're looking for in a package form at the store, and kind of understanding that is been crucial over the years. And so it's going to be its 10-year anniversary here, as well as the brewery's 10-year anniversary in May. But our double IPA, It's Complicated Being a Wizard, was first brewed and released back in October of 2014. So it was kind of like, okay, let's lean into this. This 4% table saison c'est bon isn't, maybe there's a reason there's not a lot of these on the shelf. Oh shit.
However, many thanks to the Vermont brewers that are keeping saison alive and brewing excellent iterations of those. And you literally can get some of the best saison in the country right here in Vermont, from our obvious sources.
Definitely can. And I've, snuck a few batches in there over the years as well. So we have Surfing Waves of Dopamine, which is now the kind of more modern, slightly dry hop with New Zealand hop version of that old school, near and dear to my heart, saison. Sure.
So talk to me about, I guess we should pivot and talk about IPA, because I think that's probably where most people's connection to Burlington beer comes from. You leaned into that IPA, double IPA territory and, went pretty hard with modern IPA because, I mean, let's be honest, we're coming to Vermont for beer tourism. You had people come in lining up for Heady Topper, people driving up to Hill Farmstead, lining up for beer. Now, Vermont was a beer destination that drew beer tourism from all over the New England and, North Atlantic, United States, maybe even down from Canada too. I mean, it's been interesting to see just how Vermont became a destination, and you have to feed into that too. So let's talk about IPA. But before we do that, streamline efficiency with Omega Yeast's Diacetyl Knockout series. The DKO series is comprised of 8 familiar yeast strains, engineered to knock out the formation of diacetyl before it starts. The strains you know now better, available now for made-to-order pitchables at any volume. Contact Omega Yeast today at omegayeast.com. Also, ABS Commercial has been a full-service brewery outfitter for over 10 years. They're proud to offer brewhouses tanks, keg washers, and preventative maintenance parts to brewers across the country, as well as equipment for distilling, cider making, wine making, and more. They know the ins and outs of the brewing and installation process and can design the perfect setup for you, whether you're just starting out or looking to expand. Contact them today at sales@abs-commercial.com to discuss your customized brewery needs. ABS Commercial, we are brewers. And if you're a brewer who's also interested in distilling, subscribe now to the Craft Spirits and Distilling podcast, available on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Hosted by Sydney Jones, head distiller for Few Spirits in Chicago, and Molly Troop, master distiller for Freeland Spirits in Portland, Oregon. This podcast explores the technical and creative processes behind great spirits through conversations with some of the leading distillers working today. It's everything you love about the Craft Beer and Brewing podcast, but focused on distilling. Click on the link in the show notes and give it a listen. All right, so It's Complicated Being a Wizard.
So when we first started brewing that, I was making our hoppy beers with Chico yeast, because I still have that old school respect for the Sierra Nevadas and all that West Coast. My palate was raised on that West Coast style bitter IPA. And so the first versions of Wizard were really kind of straddling that new, like you mentioned, that new haze craze that was coming in 2010 through 13. And it kind of was lower bitterness, had the blend of the modern and traditional hops, those C hops mixed with some Simcoe and Citra and Mosaic and things like that. And then finally in 2017, we pivoted to London 3 and didn't look back. And then it was just all about...
let's go.
Yeah, let's go. Let's do this. And then just leaning really hard into it and then really having fun exploring all the different. So I kind of kept coming out with different threads of IPA and double IPA, focusing on different grains. So there would be like Creatures of Magic and Orbital Elevator and Skyhook. That was just all about oats. So it was barley, flaked oats, and rolled oats, and malted oats, and just every type of oat imaginable. And then there'd be other threads where it'd be like all about raw wheat and kind of just starting to explore like
Was that for your own learning?
For
also?
my own learning
Okay.
as well, of like, okay, what's going to be the one of like to make that softest, fluffiest, pillowiest, all the trope descriptors of the styles, or that style in particular, and really trying to make the best version that we could as BB Co. Of that hazy IPA, double IPA, triple IPA, quintuple IPA, and so that was for my own kind of further explanation. I'm still always going to be a home brewer at heart. Like it's learning and understanding. I always love that expression Matt Brindleson from Firestone Walker said, where he's like, I don't use many ingredients, but the ones I do, I know really well. And so really understanding the ingredient, what the impact's going to be, a 5, 10, 20% addition, 50% addition to a grist bill, and what's that going to do to the finished product, the finished beer. And so those different threads then kind of further created and helped inform things that would become some of our flagship hazies while we were making fucking 20, 30, 40 different versions of all these different hazy threads and playing around with different hops, of course. It becomes paralysis, a choice for the customer, but a really fun playground for the brewer.
How did you track the information on that for yourself internally?
Yeah.
I'm wondering, because, people develop their own innovation processes, but then, how do you keep track of all of this learning that you're doing? Because being able to go back and reference that, probably better with all you're doing, not to just keep it in your head somewhere.
Crap. Unfortunately, a lot of it was in my head.
Okay. All right.
But I mean, at the end of the day, as much as brewing, I can't drink all the beer anymore. Going back to the homebrew days and having those friends and having 5 corny kegs on tap in a rigged up refrigerator with taps coming out of the side of it. I got to drink. I got to brew for larger amounts of people than just myself. So it's making something that I'm passionate about and love to drink, but also, understanding that Untapped is a place to get information of which one of those threads are people really loving, and then you then start combining. Well, what if it's, 10, 20% flaked oats and oat in the grist bill, and then, wow, that raw wheat element that's being contributed to those ones, like now let's start bringing them together and kind of mashing up the different
That's a hot
lines.
take, Joe. Are you saying that you're watching the Untapped scores and feeding that also into some of the information to understand how people are responding to it?
100%. 100%. I mean,
I appreciate you being honest about that. That's yeah. I mean, it is a consumer feedback mechanism. And again, because so much here depends on people coming from other places, if I'm driving up from New York, New York City to Vermont for a little beer vacation, of course you're going to do your research. What are your tools as a beer tourist to do that? That is one of those tools people are going to use.
I mean, the first time I'm at the store to pick out some beers for myself, and I see somebody looking at the shelves and they're referencing Untapped for what they're going to buy. I mean, it's just like, it has to be a tool. Like, as much as you can be jaded and hate it and whatever, but at the end of the day, that, organoleptic, normal person who hasn't tried to develop their palate, like, this beer is an acquired taste. If you don't like it, acquire some taste. Like, most people don't want to put the time in to acquire taste, and kind of accepting that is okay.
For sure. And these digital means are really just an updated version of Shelf Talkers, and, whether it's wine Shelf Talkers with a score on it or whatever else that is. I mean, we have better digital tools than printing out little cards on a retail shelf now, but that's all it is. Of course, people take recommendations, and the question is, do they take them from experts? Do they take them from peers? Probably both of those opinions are valid for various kinds of ways, but if you're trying to get out there. Anyway, interesting to use it as this kind of tool and see what people are responding to, while you also can feed your own response to those, back into it. So how did you develop then out of this? Let's test a lot of things, because I'm seeing this. Let's just make a lot of things, test all of the spectrum of this, and then you start finding some channels that you start going down that work more consistently and build some individual characters for these, because you also want to have a contrast between some of these IPAs that you're making.
Yeah, I think yeah, the contrast was the biggest, those different hop varieties, we'd have like a whole line of New Zealand beers, Time of the Chimpanzee, Sublimated Dreams, the double IPA version, Elaborate Metaphor, our pale ale that we've been making for 8-9 years now, that really is out of that raw wheat exploration. So that's really exploring getting that like bready ness from the raw wheat is now in that, been living in that pale ale for years now.
And you specifically geared it into pale ale because it was a smaller beer and you wanted to have more heft to it?
Yeah, exactly. It's a 5.4% pale ale, but really can drink, like a 6.5% IPA. You're getting that really nice dry hop character. It's Citra Amarillo in that beer. So a little bit of that Amarillo for that old school in my heart. And Citra for that modern haze expectation. And then another one of our more year-round IPAs, Uncanny Valley, 7% IPA. It's just straightforward Citra mosaic. It's got that raw wheat. It's got the rolled oats, and trying to just hit all those notes of like when people get that, it is hopefully the quintessential New England style IPA that they are expecting, right? You also want to deliver on expectation as much as experimenting and informing what I want to learn about the ingredients. Sometimes just trying to hit the nail on the head is going to, after learning all those things, like, now I know how to hit that nail on the head. And it's using those, up, down, down, left, right, BA, select.
Sure.
As Michael Tonsmere says, the cheat code hops.
Codes,
yeah, exactly.
There's something to be said for that, right? You don't need to make a Cabernet Sauvignon wine with, spices and extra ingredients just to make it better. Sometimes you can just make a really fucking good Cabernet Sauvignon. And if you can nail that, then it's going to be pretty good for you and pretty good for your customers.
Definitely.
Well, let's talk, because grain is such a big piece, of it. And let's talk a little bit about that. For Hazy IPA, where do you, what kind of base do you build for that? Obviously the range of what, brewers nowadays are using everything from the palest Pilsner malt, to more characterful English malts. There's a wide spectrum. Everyone has their preferences. Where do you fall in that?
Yeah, it's that, we're using a Pilsner base malt for that light lava bond.
Yeah.
Trying to make that really nice and clear. Used to be some Vienna malt back in the day to try to get some backbone breadiness, but just too much color pickup. And so really, it's that.
It's got to be milky.
It's got to be milky
and light. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They used to definitely be much more raw. We got a centrifuge in the last couple of years, so it kind of has taken out a little bit of that sludge and hop, literal hop oil in the bottom of the can that sometimes people would be like, yeah, I don't really pour out the last of the can. And I'm like, well, you can roll it and get it back in solution. But so now it's just kind of good from top to bottom in the can, so you can pour the full can out. But yeah, it's kind of building on 10%, 5 to 10% raw wheat, 5 to 10% wheat malt, and then 10 to 15% rolled oats, and then 5 to 15% oat malt. And so a lot of those beers will be 60 to 70% Pilsner malt, and then a blend of those different specialty malts.
Why do you use both? I mean, a lot of brewers tend to go one way or the other, but not both. And that's actually that's a pretty significant amount of adjunct in these, relative to, the norm out there. Not that there is a norm. I mean, there's always a range. But it's curious to me because that's high now.
Yeah, that's, it just gets from those trials and those that, 2016, 17, 18, just being like, that's where that's the specialty malt level I need to be to get these beers to the place, after, trying them against others and just being like, that's how much I need to be to get there. And that's homebrew days too, right? Like it kind of always takes 10% to, like, if you want to use a grain, a wild rice brown ale, it was like, okay, 5%, 3%, 5%, 7%. And it's like, I can really start noticing that wild rice being used, toasted wild rice being used at 10%. And I just have found the same thing for the wheat, like 5% wheat malt or 5% raw wheat doesn't quite get it there. Same with rolled oats. Like you get
sub threshold at that point.
Yeah, that's no fun. Sub threshold sucks. You're like, you hit over the head with it at this point. And it was like, you put 30% oat malt and flaked oats in it, you fucking get it soft.
Well, there you go. No, that it's interesting to see that now. Of course, for your brewers on the brew deck, It's going to be a fun challenge.
All hail rice holes.
Sure. Are there any specific malts that of those that you particularly gravitate to for flavor or for viscosity and feel?
Yeah, the same rolled oats that our bakers use, as I've always found. After the different, there's kind of 3-4 main flaked oats to get, but I really like that rolled oat character that we're getting from the baker's oats.
Cool.
And then the raw wheat is just standard raw wheat.
Yeah.
So
talk to me about water. Imagine you do a fair amount of you have good water up here in Vermont.
There's something about the water here in Vermont. It didn't make it didn't make the saisons taste like I was used to make them brew, and I had to try and push and pull and prod to get the water to make that saison pop the way it used to for me. But there's something about the water here where just adding, the gypsum, calcium chloride, and that famous Lake Champlain water that has made the Vermont beers. It works. It really does.
Cool. Well, then let's talk about hot side process or anything to the way that you mash other than adding a shit ton of rice hulls to make sure that you can lather this thing.
We're doing a single step mash, developing those dextrins by mashing in those hazy IPAs, double, triples, IPAs at 154 to 156 to keep those...
Keep it a little hot.
hot.
Talk to me about where your gravity goals are across this spectrum from pale ale up to double and triple IPA.
Yeah, so kind of looking for a finishing gravity between 3 and 5 for IPA to double IPA. Keep that body there.
How do you structure it? Does it go... I found it interesting as we were down at Fiden's talking about the way that their larger double IPAs actually finish at a lower gravity while their smaller beers finish at a higher gravity, which seemed a little counterintuitive to me. How do you structure those?
Yeah, we definitely are looking for the double IPAs to finish a little bit higher at the 4. So you're getting that residual sweetness from the unfermentables as well as that fluffiness from all those specialty malts. And then getting that pale ale in the upper 2.7, 2.8 with the IPAs ideally finishing around 3.2 to 3.5.
Cool. So then anything interesting about your hot side process?
I mean, pretty standard traditional English style single step mashing. I was trying to get a mash tun with some steam jackets on the side of it, but Premier was like, "Oh, we already I placed the order," and then like a month later they're like, "We just had a customer cancel on one. Do you want to get your brew house 4 months earlier?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, I do." So ended up getting that mash tun instead. So we're just doing single infusion and then mash off or bring to the denatured temperature of 170 by sparging at 172. It takes about 15-20 minutes, and then mash tun's denatured, and then running off 42 barrels for the IPAs and 38 barrels for the doubles.
It's a big system you got there.
It's a 30 barrel kit, but we push it
pushing it.
We push it. Yeah, the mash tun can hold 3,350 pounds, and then it starts coming out and then you got to put the door down too.
Sure. Talk to me. Do you do any bittering while you're boiling through that, or are you also pushing everything into the tail end there of Whirlpool? We thankfully get to put some hops in the kettle now with our newish lager program over the last year. Sure.
And we did just make a West Coast style IPA, Hawksbridge, and it was adding those kettle additions again. But no, it was just
throwback.
Throwback, exactly.
Will they buy West Coast IPA up here?
They did. It went really well.
Hey, you might have to make another one then.
I'd love to. And so, it was all about the Whirlpool edition. Keeping it soft, trying to keep the IBUs right around 25. So that for us, it was kind of that 11 to 33 pound Whirlpool edition.
Then, are you using anything like flowables or advanced hot products in that? And do you drop temperature at all in your Whirlpool?
No flowables or anything like that. And the way the brew house is set up, it would have to get a little creative about dropping temperature, so we're not doing anything like that.
And then cryo or any other advanced hops, in there.
Yeah, not in hot side. We have done cryo in hot side. It works really nicely, but ended up feeling like it was more expressive in the dry hop. Really, all of our beers are the hazies over the years have been all about that dry hop, building in kind of that baseline middle note from that Whirlpool edition, but crazy heavy dry hops.
Yeah. Is there any logic or structure to the way you push hops in a blend towards Whirlpool versus dry hop? I know there are, brewers out there who have preferences for where those things, especially now with all the information about survivables that's rolling around out there.
Definitely. And trying to just kind of balance out the terpene additions about what, getting the citron and certain ones that seem to perform better in the Whirlpool and last around, the survivables, and then kind of create that middle note of that Whirlpool edition to then complement something that's coming from the dry hop. But that middle note seems to, with our dry hop rates of 3, 4, 5, 6 pounds per barrel, sometimes aren't noticeable.
So then 20-ish IBU contribution there in the Whirlpool is giving you the middle note.
Yeah.
I like that term, the middle note. That's interesting. And but you'll still just split whatever hops are in that blend will get split between Whirlpool and dry hop, or?
Sometimes there are a hop that's not used in the dry hop used in the Whirlpool to give that counterbalance to what's happening in the dry hop, but many times it's complementary. Like there's Simcoe, big thank you to Sean Hill from years ago. He had an extra pallet of Simcoe that I was able to scoop up and purchase, and now Simcoe's been in It's Complicated Being a Wizard ever since. And so that was that helped kind of inform what that beer became because of happenstance and luck, and was kind of playing around with different dry hop bills for what that beer would become, and just kind of that random moment helped inform like, oh, this is actually kind of what I've been looking for the whole time in that beer. And so there's Simcoe to this day in the Whirlpool in the dry hop.
What does that Simcoe add in this kind of hazy IPA context?
So what I'm looking for when we go to do hop selection now, Simcoe out there, is that pineapple note. Yeah. Really trying to get that pineapple and pine from it is the main flavors I'm trying to get out of Simcoe now.
Then, how much Simcoe do you tend to use in a blend?
And that one, it's about 65% Simcoe, 70% Simcoe, with a little bit of
Simcoe.
It is a lot of Simcoe, and then kind of rounded out with some Idaho 7, which has been really nice in there. Creates just kind of some je ne sais quoi type hop flavors. You're getting like the tropical, floral, some citrus, but then there's always been a little bit of Chinook in there as well, and I couldn't let it go. And I was like, well, if I don't keep adding Chinook, it won't still be Wizard. And so there's just a little bit of Chinook and Simcoe in the Whirlpool, and then a little bit of Chinook in the dry hop as well. And we played around with Chinook cryo. And so then you're getting kind of all the best, most modern, like what the best parts of Chinook are, without some of that vegetal mass that's pulling some of the like, oh, that's Chinooks, that's West Coast only. But then we found the Chinook cryo really allows it to still play in that hazy modern IPA world by still like it being entrenched in, well, Wizard has some Chinook in it. And so it's nice to be able to keep that hop in the recipe while modernizing it as well.
If you told me it was a Simcoe Idaho 7 Chinook IPA, I would guess that it was clear. I mean, that's interesting. It's interesting that, through fermentation, you're able to, pull out, this kind of character that people might expect from a hazy IPA. Although I suspect it's got its own character that way rather than the standard Citra method. But there's no Citra then even in this core hazy IPA.
Nope. So really during hop selection.
Bold move, Joe. Bold move.
Thank you. And I don't know, sometimes what makes I've heard like a great guitarist great is like, obviously you can be the most technically sound, savage Nashville studio musician, but sometimes just being able to identify the guitarist in 3 notes. And so I think by it not like Uncanny Valley, that's meant to like hit it on the head, right? It's Citra Mosaic, it's a 7% hazy IPA, but then kind of wizard, just having its own flavor profile through the hop selection, trying to get the early harvest Simcoe, the early harvest Idaho 7. It's expressing its most fruity form of those hops. So it's not getting left on the vine or the vine to turn dank and all of that. So we're getting the extra pineapple, the extra tropical flavors from the Idaho 7 by getting the early harvest. And then it kind of allows it to play in that modern double IPA hazy world by still using ingredients, like you said, would think would be a clear double.
That's really cool. And that's unexpected, but also you love to see that kind of different approach. And I want to dig in more on some of your hop approach now, because that's fascinating to me. And obviously, naturally, we have lots of conversations about brewing, and I get drawn to all of the edge cases because you see an edge case for a hazy IPA like this with such a unconventional hazy IPA hop bill, and that's fascinating. And so anyway, we'll dig more into that. But before that, the latest product from Yakima Chief Hops, YCH 702, is a flowable extract designed to maximize aroma and increase whirlpool yield. YCH 702 is flowable at room temperature, standardized to 20% total oil, and contains high concentration of survivable hop compounds, which increases the chances of the aroma showing up in the final beer. 1 kilogram of YCH 702 equates to 10 kilograms of T90 pellets. YCH 702 Citra, Mosaic, Simcoe, and Sabro are available. Contact your Yakima Chief Hops rep for more information. And also, if you're opening or expanding a brewery, getting your building right is one of the most important things you'll ever do. The architects at OPA Design Studio are your partners in developing the unique design you need. With over a decade of experience designing breweries, the folks at OPA are here to serve as your trusted experts from start to finish with their full range of architectural services. Visit designopa.com to set up your no-obligation introductory consultation today. Let's keep talking about hops. I normally make everyone wait to talk about hops till the very end, but since we're talking about it already, I'm just curious. Again, like you said, you're building these different expressions within the same kind of family, but you do want them to be different so that different people can find the things that they like, and so that if somebody buys different cans of hazy IPA from you, each one's going to feel different. Talk to me about some of the other hop lanes that you love to play in. You mentioned New Zealand hops. Are there other hop lanes and ways that you're blending some of these that become interesting?
Yeah, in Creatures of Magic, our really oat heavy IPA that's got some Equinox cryo in it, and kind of creates that little bit of piney spice, but still giving off the tropical flavors. That's been a really fun lane to play in. And then, of course, the New Zealand lane is just ongoing. That Nectaron, though, that shit is.
Yeah.
And then
what is it about Nectaron?
It just is. It's like Citra amped up on something even more citrusy and tropical. And then we've just gotten some Superdelic in and played around with that last year, and are about to get some more in and turn that one up to 11 into a double IPA form. And just those flavors that come out of New Zealand are just so fun to play with, blending up all different, playing with.
How do you build the middle notes in those New Zealand hop IPAs?
Really using the Whirlpool edition of those New Zealand hops, kind of figuring out sometimes some of the lower alpha ones are better for it, I found, and then saving some of the higher alpha ones that have a higher oil content normally for the dry hop to get that punch, but then some of the those middle notes coming from the Whirlpool of some of the sometimes more obscure New Zealand hops, like a Mutier or a Kohatu and things like that, are really just, they kind of become a sum greater than their parts by using the 4, 5, 6 different varieties of New Zealand hops to get it to this at times almost like it has Nelson in it, but doesn't. But now some of our New Zealand IPAs do have, Nelson, Rawaka, all the super sexy ones.
That's interesting, though, to kind of blend across a spectrum of New Zealand hops in order to, again, kind of build this depth to it. Talk to me about that. I mean, that's, there's always these competing strategies, right? I also hear from brewers are like, if I'm going to make a beer with a specific hop, I just want that to showcase that hop, and it needs to be big and bold. Then of course there's this classic IPA hopping strategy, driven out of that old West Coast and American IPA, where you want to build a blend with hops so that if anything changes year to year, you're still in the same kind of space. But it's interesting to me to hear about blending 5 or 6 different New Zealand hops in order to think about that range of character that you're building.
Yeah, I mean, single hop beers can be so wonderful. We had a whole single hop series back in the day where it was just like Vic Secret, Citra, Mosaic, Idaho Set, and so again, for Galaxy. Oh man, God, that hop has burned me so many times.
Did I just say the G word? I guess I did.
And so kind of, again, doing all those single hop series to further, wrap my head around which ones are these going to contribute now with maybe used to be Chico, now with our London 3 strain, and understand them the same way I was doing it to understand malt. And, sometimes some of those single hop IPAs would hit all the notes that I'm looking for, the middle, the high, the low, the intangible ones. And then sometimes it would feel like it's missing something, and then it's kind of figuring out, okay, which player in the band, is it missing a banjo player, a bass player, a keyboard,
a second percussionist.
A second percussionist.
Since we're here in Jam Band Central, right?
Yeah, exactly. Is it missing Mickey on the on the drums?
I love the music metaphors, by the way, and I traffic in them all the time. So we're speaking the same language here. Let's talk a little bit about fermentation. Then you mentioned going full in 2017 on London 3.
Yeah, and so like I said, using Chico in those first 2 years, and then it was so interesting to take some of the same beers we were making, and then all of a sudden a month later, them having London 3 in it. Chasing Rabbits was a kind of a wheat heavy Cascade forward beer, and then we had Light in the Window, which was a rye IPA that had a lot of Chinook in it, and so much. And then all of a sudden it's like the same beer, but now with London 3, and it becomes this whole other animal. And that was always something I love doing on a homebrew scale, is you do a batch and you split it, and it can become drastically different color beers just from different yeast strains. And really, yeast is insane how much it can actually change the character of a beer, sometimes even more so than malt selection or hop selection.
So talk to me about what happened to those beers. I mean, that seems crazy on your customers to like, hey, this beer that you've ordered in the past, now I'm making it with London Ale 3, not Chico, and now it's going to be turbid. And yeah,
I mean, they liked it more overnight.
I bet you they did. Now you're giving them what they truly wanted. Exactly. How did that change your approach to fermentation? What did you discover through now, obviously, because we've already set up the idea that you just experiment endlessly, to learn from it. With those early fermentations, what did you start learning, and how has that, conditioned the way that you use London 3 now?
So basically, as soon as we made the switch, it was just a lot of research leading up to making the switch. How to prevent diacetyl, how to be able to get good harvests off the beer, a lot of the logistics stuff. And so how much earlier we needed to do a de-rest, turn it up to 72, but then we were getting really poor harvests at the beginning. So we needed to figure out how soon we could turn it up to 72 without getting too much fruit character. And then we started doing a kind of mini crash to get the yeast to flock out. So we would turn it down to 65 after a good 3-day diacetyl rest. And then we noticed that we were still able to pull good healthy yeast off the bottom of the cone, where we were really struggling with that at the beginning of switching to London 3. So it was definitely a good 3 to 4 or 5, 6 months of like, fuck, where'd the yeast go? Where'd why isn't it down there anymore? And so
gotta buy a new pitch.
Shit.
I wasn't budgeting for that.
No, and shit, can it be here in 5 days? And so yeah, making that was a kind of difficult transition, but obviously for the best of what we were after at that point, by leaning in so heavy to the hazy IPAs at that point. And in those early years too, it was, when you're coming in new and starting a brewery at that time when hops were a bit more difficult to come by, it was having to build recipes around hops I actually could have access to. And so some of the progression of the brewery over the years was like sweet and like I can get some Citra or Mosaic now. And so now I can make new brands and new beers with that. Like, it was difficult to get those varieties at first in 2014. And so some of those early beers and brands that I created were just built around hops I knew and loved and could get. And so then it was like, I have a Citra contract coming on. I have a Mosaic contract coming on. And then, being able to build new beers and new recipes around those new varieties that I was getting access to. And so then how they could, some of those brands were in the middle of switching to London 3 and figuring out how to best use this yeast and when to dry hop with this new yeast to get all the biotransformatives. Like, okay, day 5, let's figure on that. Oh shit, but then if we do that, we can't get any yeast. Maybe we can do a really small dry hop and still get a decent harvest. But then it kind of doing side-by-side trials of like, well, are we noticing that day 3, 4, 5 dry hop? If we're just going to dry hop it at 4.5 pounds per barrel, like it's going to be all there. But we still need yeast so we can make the next batch of beer. And so noticing like, are you really getting those, really high, like almost imperceptible notes from that middle or from that early dry hop edition. And so we did end up scrapping that middle dry hop edition so we could get nice yeast harvests to keep moving forward. So
now you crash, pull yeast, and then dry hop the old-fashioned way.
So, like I said, I'm started what's turned into a modern brewery.
But now of course all the research is also showing that actually leads to a little more haze stability, and
Yeah, exactly. It's been a lot of fun switching to Lemon 3.
4.5 pounds per barrel. You're just cranking a lot of hops in there that way too.
Yeah, we are.
So then, what's the split? How much is Whirlpool, and then how much goes into dry hop typically for these?
I can just lay it right out. 30 barrel kit, so it'll be like a 22 pound Whirlpool edition, and then dry hops 143.
Cranking. How did the London Ale 3 fermentation change some of the expression of these, hops that you knew really well?
Yeah, it really, added that fruit element that, then that's why I felt comfortable leaving Chinook in Wizard, because seeing with what it did to lighten the window, the rye IPA on that beer, I loved it when it was clear and with Chico, but man, when it was made with the London 3 and you had that heavy, like 25% rye malt character to it, another one of those unique grains that I love leaning into and then with the Chinook, it was just like, holy shit. Like if you were to hand that glass to somebody and say, this is a Chinook single hop rye IPA, you get those peppery white pepper rye notes, but the Chinook just expressed itself in this new way with the London 3 that I hadn't experienced before with it. And it really gave me confidence that it could, be a part of Wizard into 2024.
Sure. Anything else in the IPA space that you really enjoyed learning and playing from over the last year or two?
Maybe not the last year or two, but I know there's love and hate towards the milkshakes. And when those were going hard in 17, 18, 19, 20, like it was a lot of fun playing in that space, and we were one of the few breweries.
Lactose, fruit, and hops.
And, you can't forget the vanilla either.
The vanilla, of course.
There's no shake unless it's got vanilla, because then traditionally it's just a milk stout, right? So it'd just be a milk IPA without the vanilla. You got to have the vanilla.
The vanilla makes the shake.
It makes the shake. Yeah. Otherwise, you just got yourself a milk IPA.
All right.
That's not a milkshake. No, you got to have vanilla. if you ever make ice cream that without vanilla, it doesn't taste right. Like you gotta have the vanilla, and so
vanilla is the brewer's secret, right? I remember talking to Brett Coleman Baker at Urban Artifact. He's like, every fruit beer we make, whether we say it or not, has vanilla in it, because even if it's just sub threshold where we're not talking about it, it's like it just it adds a definition and a contour to that fruit flavor that you just don't get without it. So right. So you're absolutely the first brewer that's ever told me that they miss milkshake.
I wouldn't say I miss. I don't miss. I am so happy that let me state that. I'm so happy the beer flavored beer pendulum is swinging back our direction. Sure. Again, starting with an English mild, the table saison. I think my cred is there, but I will say it was a ton of fun just getting, I mean, that culinary world is so inspiring. That's so much of my homebrew was back in the day, and creating recipes, going to the farmer's market and picking out fruit and not even knowing what style of beer I'm going to brew until I get there and see what fruit was available. Having this whole Farm Fresh series in my Hopfen-Treader homebrew days. And was like, and that's where the strawberry whale cake came out of, like, oh, cream ale would go really nice with strawberries. Not reinventing the wheel, but just using a lot of strawberries and kind of take it past where Pete took it or things like that. But it was just, I mean, I was making like a carrot cake inspired milkshake IPAs with carrot puree and juice and ginger and lemon meringue pie. I mean, nothing reinventing the wheel, but it was just such a fun playground to experiment with, and just really subtlety's gone. Let's get hit over the head with a mallet and see how far we can take it. Again, with all the pastry stouts, we did more than a dozen of each during those years. So it was, and then the smoothie, pastry sours, and it's obscene. Beer's meant to be fun. Like, yes, we can have the traditional stuff, but it's fun to play with the flashes in the pan as well.
Truly, it's just a new generation of the same experimentation that homebrewers have always been doing back to the beginning of that homebrewing, and it's just out here in the commercial brewing world now too. Let's shift some gears though and talk about what innovation looks like now for you, now that you have a 300-seat restaurant here in Burlington and can make things like your mild and these beers that are meant for consuming with food, as well as lagers. And it's so funny to think that now this is the new wave of innovation for you, is getting back to some of these styles that you may have launched the brewery with and brewed back in the day, and now you get you have this place to hone them in because you have a inbuilt market that wants to drink those kinds of things.
Yeah, so on our 30 barrel kit, I've been sneaking in some half batches. So where we still have a couple 15s. Started the brewery with the 15 barrel Frankenstein brew system with 2 electric heating elements in it. Bought some stainless tanks online. The old story. Like, I don't know what these tanks were used for, but now they're making beer. Had a local welder come in, cut grain outdoors into it, install these elements, and so we had a 15 barrel kit to start. So that's what we brewed on for that's what I brewed on for the first 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah, it was a lot of beer through that thing. It was a long day. You got it in the kettle and hand scrubbed, the element with a little sponge to make sure you didn't get any burn on. And so we still have those 15s around, the 15 barrel cones and bright tank. And so kind of sneaking in some rye pale lager though, not just your, normal Roggen beer. So it's 40% rye malt. I love rye malt as much as people are usually scared by it for some reason.
What do you love about it, and why are you not scared of it? What have you found that makes it work, especially in lager?
I just the flaked rye and
I had one of those when I was sitting here on Friday, just because had to try this lager, and beautiful dimpled mug, like
exactly. It just gives so much of the same mouthfeel that oats provide, but instead of kind of just that neutral flavor tone that oats have, where you're getting that soft, you're getting the pillow, you're getting all that, but then the rye actually contributes a flavor, and I just love that about it. It has that white pepper, it has that unique grain flavor to it. You're getting that spice that some customers don't necessarily enjoy, but I just love it. And so kind of sneaking a rye lager in there. We've got another sneaking.
And there are great lager brewers around here in Vermont too, not too far away from you. Definitely. Maybe another one that I've also done a podcast with on this trip. You don't need to make the same beer. You've got your own personality to it.
Yeah, and then taking that brewing personality developed through those, all that homebrew made back in the day, and kind of trying to put my own spin on it. My wife came up with a great tagline for my homebrew blog, but now we've been using it at BBCO, is where fermentation meets imagination, and just growing up on that original Willy Wonka movie and just willing to go further, go farther. What's the highest threshold for this? Like, let's just be absurd with it. Let's be irreverent, and putting my own, hopefully, and putting the BBCO spin on it. Like, it was always Okay, I'm going to make a brown ale, but I want to put wild rice in it because that toasted umami wild mushroom flavor is just so nice when you're searing off, a burger or something, that mushroom Swiss burger or something, and it's just trying to get inspired by what unexpected ingredient you can use in a style that already exists that will complement the flavor. And so even in a subtle style like the lagers, trying to do that as well, go really far with the ingredient that I want to notice or I want to taste and play with or highlight. And so the rye lager, we have an oat pale or golden lager coming out soon. There was some, playing with some golden naked oats, which are more traditionally used in the hazy IPAs. And it's like 35% oats in that beer, and it's just going to be an oat lager. And trying to see kind of some of the same experimentation done with the hazy IPAs and what the malts contribute in those styles when they're, on the foundation for a big hop profile, now seeing what they're the foundation, but also the expressive character that they can be in the lager now that there's no dry hop, neutral yeast, and seeing what those malts do. Sneaking in a smoked Helles here soon because I just love smoked beers. So I don't know, the taproom style beers allow me to bring back to more of my traditional brewing roots and play around with ingredients at obscene levels that can be enjoyed here in this setting.
Sure, but even with these lagers, there's still a smoothness and a cohesion. They don't taste like funky experiments, of intensity. Talk to me a little bit about how you still are polishing the edges, on something like a pale rye lager.
Yeah, and so using our house lager yeast, it's neutral but a little extra fruity than a traditional lager yeast, and I really like that character.
I could see that working well with rye too.
Yeah, I think it helps balance the spice, so it's not just too in your face. It's the same yeast for the semi-class beer. So we first brought that in to ferment a really high gravity Baltic style porter with Sangiovese grapes that was aged in Pinot Noir and bourbon barrels. And I just like that clean, neutral flavor it provided, even though half the batch was fermented in wooden barrels without temperature control. And then we blended it off, but it still stayed neutral. So that fruit character was just coming from the grapes. And so kind of stuck around with that yeast I knew and loved and trusted for our new lower ABV lagers as well. And then again, allowing that malt character to shine at the obscene levels that Rice Hulls help save.
Sure. Any other interesting projects that you're working on right now that are, helping drive that imagination as well as fermentation?
I mean, we're about to launch Little Wizard this weekend, so kind of been sitting on this flagship double IPA, and it's been chugging along and really fun beer to make and hone in and make as consistent as possible over the years. But it's also this amazing brand. And so this year has kind of become the year of the wizard for us. And building out
the wizard.
Yeah. And building out a wizard brand family. So again, this is not going to be the brewing geeky stuff. This is more, business marketing side, but that's what we've been is building out that year of the wizard. So about to launch Little Wizard, which is a 6% version of Wizard. And it literally just is Wizard scaled down to 6%. So it's still Simcoe, Idaho 7 Chinook. It still has the same percentages of the malt grist bill that Wizard has, just a more sessionable potion, if you will.
Right on brand. Well, let's zoom out here. As we finish, you've come a long way from brewing, 50 some odd homebrew batches in a year while also working professionally in a brewery. Brewing other parts of the country, coming back home to Burlington to launch your dream brewery, growing that up from a Frankenstein 15-barrel system with electric, and a 15, crazy, to now having this beautiful 300-seat restaurant. Tap room, and Burlington Beer Company has come a long way over your brewing career. What do you hope to achieve in the next few years? Where do you want to go next? What's your ultimate goal for BB Co?
Yeah, so I mean, we did 16,000 barrels last year, which I think puts us in the top 200 brewing by volume in the country, which is mind-boggling to think about how in the last 10 years becoming that. It was always kind of my goal to get to like 10. It seemed like a nice sweet spot. And so now we do have the tank space to get to 24. So we're hoping to slowly grow into that. But really just my goal hopefully one day is it can be taken over by my kids. I've got a 10 and a 6-year-old. I named my eldest son is Cooper after barrel makers. So I'm hoping Cooper and Hazel want to start learning the art and science and business of brewing. And my son's got a talent for drawing comic strips. So he's already drawn some stuff and sent it over to our in-house creative director. And Tim's like, oh, I'll turn that into a label, with our iconic line artwork aesthetic. And so that's really the long-term goal. Is hopefully it becomes a family business and I can hang out with them for 40 plus hours a week instead of just sending them off to school. We can all hang out together and continue to work together.
That is beautiful. And I think that's a great place to bring this to a close. Choose G&D Chillers on your next expansion or brewery startup and receive 1 free year of remote control and monitoring. Take your operations to the next level with the experts at ProBrew. Old Orchard is the go-to source for fruit-forward ingredients for some of the biggest names in the craft brewing landscape. Omega Yeast's Diacetyl Knockout series is comprised of 8 familiar yeast strains engineered to knock out the formation of diacetyl before it starts. ABS Commercial are proud to offer brewhouses, tanks, keg washers, and preventative maintenance parts to brewers across the country. If you're a distiller or curious about it, check out the Craft Spirits and Distilling podcast. YCH 702 is a flowable extract designed to maximize aroma and increase whirlpool yield. And the architects at OPA Design Studio are your partners in developing the unique design you need. If you enjoyed this podcast, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button, support us so that we can keep bringing great conversations to you and also bringing great articles, stories, recipes, and more throughout our magazines. Joe, if people want to learn more about BBCO, both on the digital space as well as experiencing the beer or the tap room right here, where do they find you all?
Yeah, we're online at burlingtonbeer.com. Of course, the normal socials, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. And
it's X now.
It's X now. Yeah, of course. Sure is. And so... and then you can use our beer finder on our website. It links to it. If you go to our bio and Instagram page, you can get to the beer finder. We're distributed in a good number of states now across New England, down to the mid-Atlantic, as well as in Texas and Colorado. So go check out the beer finder and find some BBCO near you.
Simcoe and my Hazy IPA.
Goddamn right.
And Idaho 7 and Chinook. God bless you. Anyway, great talking with you about brewing. Cheers.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate you visiting.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.